Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Benjamin Z. Miller Investor Networking Group. It is so nice to have you all here. I'm looking forward to going over an interesting presentation that we have today. For those of you that are seeing this on the internet, the Benjamin Z. Miller Investor Networking Group, we have a free meeting every week, and you can come. You can meet investors from around the world. We've got investors from the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Norway, Sweden. We've got them from all over France. And we talk about a different topic each time. Today, we're going to discuss trusts for investors. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the goals of this presentation are, I want to explain what is a trust. I'm going to compare some of the different types of trusts. I'm going to describe how they work in different countries because there are some differences. I'm going to point out a few famous trusts, some of which you may have heard of. I'm also going to discuss some less well-known trusts, and I'm going to show you how you can create a trust in the U.S. for free. So the first thing that I want to talk about is jurisdictional variations in law, and this is so relevant with trusts because there's basically civil law and common law. In the United States, we use the common law system, and in most of Europe they use the civil law system. However, in the United Kingdom they use in the United Kingdom they use common law for most of it. So civil law, it comes from Roman law, and it is something where it relies very heavily on written codes and statutes as the primary source of law, whereas in the United States, our common law, it has its roots in medieval England, and it's also predominant in the United Kingdom. The common law is also used there. So it relies more on judicial decisions. So it's something that's real relevant, and this comes into play with trusts. So here's a table that shows common versus civil law, and some of the things you can see. So common law, it came from English medieval law. Civil laws from Roman law, and countries that use common law are the US, the UK, Canada, Australia. There's many others. These are just examples. Civil law, you find that in Germany, France, Japan, Brazil, Ukraine, these sorts of countries. So very good. Now let's talk about looking at some of the common law countries like the UK and the US, and I'm going to mention a few things. So in the UK, trusts, they're used for a lot of different purposes like estate planning, wealth management, and charity. And in the US, we do the same thing. In France, they have they use civil law in France, and they have some slight variants, the characteristics there. In Germany, they use Treuhand, which is an arrangement that operates similarly in some respects to a trust. So Treuhand is actually, if you translate that to English, it means loyal hand, Treuhand, loyal hand. And it's the idea that you've got someone that's a loyal person that's handling your business on your behalf. And then, you know, this is something that's relevant. But what exactly is a trust? Well, a trust is it's a fiduciary relationship that's between a grantor. The grantor would be the person or the company that is putting the assets, conveying the assets into the trust. And then who is the trust for? Who are the beneficiaries of the trust? For example, if you have a rental property and you decide that you want to put it in a trust and you want your daughter to be the beneficiary of the trust, your daughter is the beneficiary of the trust. You're the grantor of the trust. And you could also be the trustee, actually. The trustee manages the trust. But there's also professional trustees, where if you have a large collection of assets and you want to have it professionally managed, you can also have it managed that way. But the advantages to trusts are they give anonymity, they provide sometimes protection from creditors. You also can limit beneficiaries' access to the funds. Maybe if you've got younger children and you don't want to give a 19-year-old access to a large amount of money because he might be tempted to spend it foolishly, you can put restrictions in place on what the beneficiaries can do. So there's a lot of different reasons to use a trust. I'm going to go through just a few examples. I'm not even going to go through all of them, but in the U.S. estate planning, if you've got a parent that is looking to pass on their primary residence to their children, can use a trust. Asset protection in the United States, maybe a medical doctor, and they're in a situation where they don't want to get sued by a patient and have the patient get their assets for malpractice. Say they're concerned about that. Maybe they get some large judgment and that is a concern. Well, if the doctor has set up an irrevocable trust, it's going to be more difficult for those assets to be taken. Charitable giving, and we'll go through some examples of trusts that were set up that way. Special needs planning, maybe there's a child that has a disability, and this is something that can come into play there. For example, in the UK, there's pension planning. Maybe an individual establishes a pension trust to control how some of the assets are invested. In Switzerland, maybe business succession. That's a common way that they're used in Switzerland, where an owner wants to smoothly transition the ownership. A trust can come in handy if they're going to have the ownership go to the next generation. Lots of uses. What about some of the types? These are not all of the types. These are just an excerpt of some of them, and we'll talk about a few others. Well, a revocable trust, that is a situation where you, as the grantor, you still are in charge of the assets. It allows you to have some advantages, but it's not protected from creditors, and it is taxed as part of the grantor's estate. There's an irrevocable trust, like the example we talked about with the doctor that put assets in. That can be something that can provide asset protection. Charitable trust, those have some tax deductions and also some very significant benefits. Generation skipping trust, this is an interesting one where if you want to set up a trust and instead of having your children be the beneficiaries, you could make it your grandchildren or even later generations. Qualified personal residence trust, this is another one that can be used, the right to live in a residence for a term of years. Lots of different options there. So how about across different countries? Well, one area that's quite popular for trusts is the Cayman Islands. They have what's called a star trust, which is and they also offer a revocable trust, an asset protection trust. Cayman Islands is known for flexible trust laws. They're an offshore finance center. Again, Germany, we talked about Germany with Treuhand, Hand, Loyal Hand, which is, they don't in Germany recognize traditional trust, but they have Treuhand, which is a fiduciary agreement essentially. In Ukraine, they don't use trust. It's they're not in the common law sense widely adopted. United Kingdom, they have a lot of trust. They have bear trust, discretionary trust, interest in possession trust. They have a lot of sophistication in trusts in the United Kingdom. The US, we've got revocable, irrevocable, charitable, special needs, lots of different trusts. There's all sorts of usages, and for example, maybe something like that is relevant. A grantor trust is an important one to be aware of. This is a trust where the creator retains control over the income and the assets. These can be set up for estate planning and for tax simplification. And in the US, grantor trusts are outlined in section 671 and 679 of the Internal Revenue Code, but it avoids having to create a separate tax return. You can use your own tax ID number. Well, let's talk about less well-known trusts. Well, there's dynasty trusts. These, as mentioned, they transfer wealth across generations. There's even pet trusts, and I'll give an example of a very famous pet trust that was used. Blind trusts, these are used by politicians when they're not exposed to conflicts of interest. Life insurance trusts, even gun trust. There's a lot of different ones. And in the PowerPoint that I email out, you'll get a copy of everything, but really interesting. So now we're going to talk about some of the more famous trusts: the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation, the Ford Foundation, the J. Paul Getty Trust, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We've all heard of these, the British Royal Family Trusts, and the Walton family. So here is an interesting trust, and I like to show this as an example. This is Leona Helmsley, and she is from New York. She actually died in 2007 at the age of 87, and she had a sizable multi-billion-dollar estate that she left a lot of it to a charitable trust. She died at the age of 87 and was estimated to be worth between 4 and 8 billion, and set up the Leona and Harry B. Helmsley Charitable Trust. Now, the interesting thing about that is she had a dog, and she wanted to make sure that the dog was well taken care of. And she allocated $12 million in the trust for the care of her pet dog. This is also interesting because there were legal disputes later where the judge actually said that 12 million was not necessary, and that I believe the amount that it finally was settled on was 2 million. But even so, at least the dog is well taken care of. So it's a great fun story. John D. Rockefeller Trust. It was originally started with around 900 million. This is in 1916, but today it has over $20 billion in the trust. The Ford Foundation, they have a trust as well that was originally started in 1936 by Edsel Ford with 25,000. It's now estimated that as of 2021, there's 16 billion in the trust. The J. Paul Getty Trust, that is another trust that has 6 billion as of 2021. Another type of trust that is not so well known is outside of real estate investing. It's well known in real estate investing by experienced investors. The land trust. So the land trust is a way that you can have privacy. If you don't want your name in public record when you buy a property, you can use a land trust. And the interesting thing about a land trust is it allows you to keep the real estate holdings confidential. So investors use land trusts to do several different things. Sometimes they're used to avoid the due on sale clause in mortgage agreements. And that is something that's also interesting. There's also, this is a fun one, the Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. This is structured where life insurance benefits are shielded from creditors. So say that you die, if your life insurance policy goes to your estate, well, the money from that life insurance policy is going to be used to pay out creditors. But if you die and you have a life insurance policy that goes to your trust, then that money is not subject to that. So one kind of neat thing is it protects the death benefit from creditors, and it ensures that your beneficiaries receive the full amount. So if you've got some children and you want to make sure that the money goes to them, you can use one of these. And if you also want to fund, cryopreservation, this is a new technology where instead of being buried or being cremated, you can choose to be cryopreserved, and you can have your life insurance fund. You can have, when you die and your insurance policy pays out, if it's in the name of a trust, then it can actually pay for your cryopreservation. So along with your kids. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So how do you set up a trust? It's relatively simple. The first thing you need to do is determine, hey, what am I setting this up for? What are my goals? Once you know, if maybe your goals are centered around asset protection, maybe they're centered around tax planning, maybe you're setting it up for loved ones. Once you know that, you can then make a selection of what type of trust, what kind of trust would be the best. And then you can select the trustee. In some cases, you can be the trustee. In other cases, you may want to have some outside person be the trustee. After you do make that selection, then you're going to draft the trust agreement. If you know how to do that, you can draft it. Or if you have an attorney, you just have them draft it for you. And there's also places where you can look at some examples online. And then you would fund the trust. So you can set up a trust, but if you don't put assets into it, it doesn't mean anything. You have to actually go and change the ownership of the assets to where the trust owns the assets. So you going and creating a trust, it doesn't mean anything until you actually change the ownership. So that's something that's relevant. And then managing the trust, your trustee will manage it going forward. And then you're going to distribute the assets. What documents are typically needed? Well, if we're in the United States, you need a trust deed or agreement, you need a certificate of trust, and you need a tax identification number. And that's basically what you need. And it's similar for most of the countries. There's a little bit of a difference, but the chart here kind of shows how that all works. What about United States? If we talk about the United States, what states are the most popular for setting up trusts? The most popular are Nevada, Delaware, South Dakota, Alaska, and Wyoming. And it's because in those states, for example, in Nevada, there's no state income tax. In Wyoming, there's no state income tax. You get privacy protections in all of them, and you get tax advantages, lots of choices, but those tend to be good choices for the United States. So what do the actual documents look like? Well, you can always use an attorney to help you, but you can also go to a website like lawdepot.com, and you can go to their contract section, and then you can do living trust there, and or whatever type of trust you want, and then you can select the state. So that is the presentation on trusts. There's a lot more to know about it, but this is something to just kind of get you started, some material to know a little more about it. I hope that helps. And now I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll be happy to take any questions if anyone has any questions.